This week, in a remarkable turn of events, the former Communist Party of the Soviet Union was put on trial in, of all places, Moscow. The charge that for decades it maintained a corrupt and brutal state within a state. That state was run by what was called the nomenklatura, the ruling class, an elite in what was supposed to be a classless society. What's happened to the old nomenklatura, to their perks and privileges, like the fancy country houses, the dachas? To find out, a few months ago, our man in Moscow, Artyom Borovek, climbed into a Chaika limousine, piled our 60 Minutes team into the back, and headed down the best road in Russia.
You would ask me why it's the best. Because this is the road the Moscow elite used to take to get to their duchess. Not only used to, but still does.
The first of our leaders who had a dacha build, of course, was Joseph Stalin, back in 1933 on a 15-acre estate just outside Moscow. This was the first time we were told that any journalist outside the Soviet Union had been permitted in. Stalin had two dachas. This was his favorite. It's so spacious you could put up a net and play tennis in most of the rooms.
Now, people who are in charge of this dacha right now and who restored the dacha not long ago are absolutely convinced that Stalin's soul is still here, his spirit.
Here, the Soviets used to be told, Stalin labored to build a true communist society where all men would be perfectly equal and everyone would have all that he wanted. Stalin certainly did.
This was a guest room.
He even had his own private elevator, and he could watch movies on the wide screen in the den. No one lives here anymore, but still it is impeccably maintained, as if no one in my country had had the guts to shut it down. Since our new leaders have been telling us that the days of such privilege are at an end, we thought there'd be no trouble taking a farewell look at some other official duchess. Just the sight of our long, black, official-looking Chaika sent the gatekeeper running.
It's enough to be in a Chaika to be allowed to go inside places like this.
Or so we thought. For it turns out, the duchas here are still being used by the elite. A friend of mine lives here in the dacha of his grandfather. He welcomed our visit, but the KGB guard in his jogging outfit did not.
We are being thrown out, and we have to leave this compound, and we're not allowed to stay here any longer.
Our luck wasn't much better in a nearby sanitarium, also the preserve of our elite. I asked the guards to let us in to take a few pictures. After all, the days of such privilege are over, right? Wrong. It turned out to be easier for me to get into the office of the head of the KGB than to get a first-hand look at this sanitarium.
Well, they said no way. I said, I need just one shot. They said, no way. I said, who's there? Can't tell you. So, total conspiracy.
The elite also have their way with education, at places like Moscow University, for instance. If the kids of our new nomenklatura aren't geniuses, not to worry. They can still get into our best universities thanks to family connections or bribery. Anything from an apartment to a trip abroad for a top professor will still do the trick. Boris Natkin is a professor at Moscow University. He spoke with 60 Minutes producer Barry Landau.
It is very difficult for an American to comprehend, but the closest you will have is a feudal system where members of nomenclatura are like old-type nobility. Dukes, princes, the gentry. Like a class, they were expected to have privileges, and they were expected to take care of each other.
And they did.
Of course.
They certainly did as far as healthcare goes. The hospitals most of our people go to are a disgrace. The equipment dilapidated. The medicines mostly missing. Our leaders, of course, have no such problems. They can always check into places like this hospital in Moscow's Lenin Hills. The most sophisticated medical equipment, most of it foreign, and to help our elite recover, a special sports facility with instructors ready to help them with their backhand, their crawl, or the rowing machines. Recently, this hospital also started admitting a few commoners as well. Many other facilities still don't. There is no way the average citizen can afford to buy most of the clothes available in Moscow stores these days.
But for the elite, there is a place known as the Kombinat.
500 skilled craftsmen labor here turning out clothes, all made to measure for our nomenclatura. They also turn out fine fur coats. In fact, the artisan we spoke with said he had made 2 for Raisa Gorbachev, an Austrican and a mink. The price people like Raisa had to pay, just a small fraction of the amount the average Russian would have to shell out if he could find such clothes in a Moscow store.
The new government had announced this place would be shut down, but of course it never was. The appetite of the new elite is just too great, like for shoes, for instance. The Speaker of the new Russian Parliament ordered 33 pairs. It's the same story with food. There's food now in most of Moscow stores, but who can afford the rocketing prices?
No problem for many of our elite. There are still special stores, well concealed, reserved for the people on top. Another privilege our new Democrats had promised to shut down, and haven't.
They're distributing food out there, but when I asked for permission to get in, they said no.
We got a quick peek, nothing more, in the door of another food center near the Kremlin. But we were able to talk outside to a couple of people who work there.
What they're telling me is that the system still remains the same. Nothing has changed.
Why hasn't it changed? Well, maybe because there's even a special food store that serves the members of the Russian Parliament. And they're the ones promising the changes. Privileges and corruption were even more rife in the military. Top commanders regularly made use of planes for vacation trips. The most powerful and comfortable posts were almost always filled by someone's relative. And the top military kept all their privileges even after retirement. Hundreds of millions of our defense budget went to build duchess for the top military brass. Not to mention a slew of lavish resorts, like this one on the Black Sea. Soviet soldiers were used almost as slave labor to build those homes. Most of our top artists and sports figures are also part of the nomenclatura. So are some of our most fearless, muckraking journalists. They have never reported on the privileges of the new members of parliament, because they have become members of parliament and therefore enjoyed those same benefits themselves. Everything from apartments to cars. In fact, a special parliamentary commission investigating privilege told us they were blocked by their fellow deputies from publishing their report.
As a Russian journalist, Vladimir Posner sees it, the whole system of privilege was simply a way of encouraging Soviet officials everywhere to stay in line. If you didn't,
you wouldn't go to jail. You wouldn't be punished. You wouldn't be sent to the gulag. But you'd lose your post, and with it, you'd lose everything else. And that was where the real, in my opinion, the diabolically clever idea of it all was. You could never be free. You could never really be free. You could never say, up yours, buddy, I've got everything I need, and now I'm going to live the way I want. It all goes away. No more free hospitals, no more free spas, no more free anything. You're dead.
But now there's a new source of privilege and a new elite in the Soviet Union, the dollar elite. Many were at the opening of the new Arbat Irish store in Moscow. There are places like this now all over the city. Everything here you'll never find in a normal Moscow shop. But please, no Soviet rubles, only dollars or other hard currencies. And most of the customers with those dollars are Soviets, from businessmen to black marketeers. No one asks them how they got their money. And for dollars, just about everything these days is for sale.
Including land, which is now buyable, buildings, and you can do it at rates that are totally amazing. It's almost like in the days of segregation in the United States, the back of the bus is for the blacks and the front of the bus is for the whites. Only in this case, the whites are the ones who have hard currency and the blacks are those who don't.
journalists like Vladimir Posner and myself are also at the front of the bus because we're able to earn hard currency by publishing books or working for American television. But the real kings of the dollar are once again the old elite. Top Communist Party and government officials turned overnight into ambitious capitalists, many of them already millionaires.
They've done it largely through perestroika, by making use of their official power and the property they control to generate dollars and other hard currencies.
For example, this luxurious hotel was built by the Communist Party, and only the communist elite was allowed to stay here. But then they decided that it's much more interesting to accommodate Western businessmen than fellow communists. So now it's available only to those who can pay in hard currency, minimum of $200 a night.
And that hotel was only one of 5,000 buildings the Communist Party controlled. When Yeltsin's people took over Communist Party headquarters after the coup last August, they found files on some 100 publishing houses, 80 printing plants, fleets of cars, even a furniture factory, hundreds of billions of rubles in assets of all kinds. They wanted to seize them, but huge amounts have already disappeared, ripped off by the same officials that once administered that property in the name of the people.
They have privatized for their own purposes what was the so-called state-owned.
They've taken over properties of the state.
Yes, for their own private personal consumption.
In fact, in many cases, communist officials have established their own commercial banks, set up joint ventures with foreign businesses, like this company of consulting engineers. The French put up the capital, the communists put up one of their party buildings, and also took several key positions in the company. Or take this project, to construct one of the rare new office buildings in Moscow. The American partner in the affair, John Ruther, admits that without the clout of his Soviet partners and the state companies they control, this project would never have gotten off the ground.
These are companies that can produce bricks, they can produce steel, they can produce concrete, they can deliver gravel. If you're going to be in the construction business, you need a partner like that. And historically, those have been either ministries, city construction organizations, maybe organizations directly tied with the Central Committee of the party, or maybe even with the KGB.
Over the past weeks, we have spoken with all kinds of officials in Moscow and Western Europe who are trying to unravel the tangle of joint ventures, secret dealings, trying to track down those assets. Some of them possibly even sold it away to fund future underground operations of the Communist Party.
The party is there, and while it may change very profoundly, it's not going to disappear. And it did have a lot of money, and it does have a lot of money, and that money is somewhere. And I think that could be the all-time detective story of the 20th century, to find out how that money has been used and where it's gone and what's happening to it right now as we speak.
One of the few people who could have given the answers to many of the questions about the party's wealth and where it went, one of those men can't talk. After he had been questioned by state authorities, on August 26th, Nikolai Kruchina fell to his death from the terrace of his apartment of this luxury Moscow building. A building, of course, set aside for top party officials. Kruchina was the Communist Party's chief financial officer. They say it was a suicide, but a lot of people don't believe that.
Officials here from the Russian prosecutor's office immediately searched his apartment. Inside, they told me they found secret documents.
Those documents prove that over the past couple of years, the party elite has made full use of its official power to transfer billions and billions of rubles outside this country, investing them in foreign companies under assumed names, and burying the money in secret bank accounts. And that's the money they're looking for all over the world right now. But much of the answer may well lie with Mikhail Gorbachev, who, after all, ran the Communist Party for almost 7 years. He has been, to put it politely, invited to testify at the trial of the Communist Party, which will be going on in Moscow over the next few months.
But according to Artyom Borovek, that trial may never run its course. At stake are not just some very important reputations in Moscow, but also in the West. For instance, documents have already been uncovered showing that huge amounts of Communist Party funds were spent to support leftist organizations throughout the world, and that in the mid-1970s, the Communist Party, via the KGB, funneled money and weapons to Palestinian terrorists for attacks on American and Israeli diplomatic officials throughout the world. Those revelations, say Borovek, may be just the beginning.